And we are live.
Amazing. Welcome to the first ever Humans Behind Human. I am your host, Jo, and I'll be having a conversation with Hugo and Min, who are the co-founders of Humin. Humin is designing an automated mood tracking app that will be able to give you personalized insights. And we've set aside about 40 minutes for this informal conversation, and I'm just going to find out who they are, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and then for anyone who is interested, how to get this app for themselves or for somebody that they care about. So I know that they're both very qualified humans, but I would love you guys to know a little bit more about them. So I'm just going to read you their bios and then jump into some questions. Also to say that we have got a chat available. So if you have any questions while we're chatting, please put them in there. If we don't get to them this evening, we will cover them on another social media platform and let you know. So Hugo is doing a PhD in artificial intelligence for medical imaging at King's College London, where he's working to reduce the workload on radiologists for cardiac MRI screening. At Humin, he's driving all things technical, and he's currently working on finding novel biomarkers for depression and bipolar disorder. He previously worked as a data scientist in a tech startup during the pandemic, helping care homes during the crisis. Hugo holds postgraduate degrees in cybersecurity, machine learning, and healthcare technologies. Min works in the national NHS team, rolling out technology across the country. She previously worked in the NHS as a business analyst, project manager, and an innovation mental healthcare startup, digital analyst. You've got quite a list there, Min. She majored in neuroscience and mental health during her biomedical science and management degree at Imperial College, and has a master's in mental health care technologies from King College London. So you guys have quite the bio, and there is no doubt at all that you have the ability to design an app. But I think why we're here, why I got involved certainly, is because you're so much more than that. And it's your stories that are so compelling. So we're here to meet the humans behind. So I'm going to jump and say, hi, Min. Hi, Hugo. Min, I just wanted to say that I have been listening to the Humin podcast, and it's been an absolute delight. We've been listening to like your lived experience of disordered eating, and although I can't directly relate to all of your experiences, what I can say is that I relate to some of it, and that journey transcends past just your own journey, and I can hear how therapeutic it is for you, and that has hope. And there's just nothing that hope is an incredible thing. So I listen to it on Spotify, but I think people can listen to it anyway. And I guess that's what makes me really curious, is listening to your story with your mental health. And I'm wondering, like, how did you move from struggling and caring about your own mental health, and then now we're designing an app? And if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, thanks, and welcome everybody as well. Thank you so much for joining today. Every time I hear people talking about my podcast, I tend to sort of shrivel up because of look, I think my experience with eating disorders really took some time for it to take shape in the way that I could use it to almost like propel myself forward. But I think fundamentally, once you've suffered something mentally, there's this shift where the word mental health lands completely differently. And that's why I went on to do mental health, and that's why I went on to look at neuroscience. And I wanted to look at how I could get myself to realize that I'm going on a downward spiral before I hit rock bottom, because I didn't understand, like, why does it have to be this way? Like, why am I so desperate every time I realize that, like, I need help? Like, why couldn't I have seen that before? And can I do something about it? And that's what sort of got me interested in looking at behavioral characteristics that come out of us, because it tells us so much about how we're feeling, what we're thinking about, what we're obsessed with, what we're worried about. And I was lucky enough to get some real experience on sort of behavioral tracking or behavioral analytics in a clinical setting, looking at sort of treatment resistant depression. And I think that sort of opened up my mind to what is possible and how things should be done and how things are not done the way it should be right now. A lot of the data being pulled into pharma companies to generate more evidence. And I thought, you know what, a lot of this information could actually help us um, recognize some of these things before things get out of hand. So, long story short, sort of stumbled into opportunities, and you always have to take them as they come, don't you? So
Yeah. I think you made a really interesting point around data and where it goes. And I think I'm definitely going to circle back to that around like privacy and security. Um, but I know with my lived experience, like it's been so hard to put things into apps because it's just either I don't actually want to log when I'm having a down mood, or I forget, or it's just there's so many different impacts that which I've started apps and never been able to stick with anything. And what you've been talking about here is something very different between personally logging your mood and it automatically being done. And so I know when I've spoken to you, Hugo, it's an absolute delight to see how your face like lights up and how you geek over like AI and machine learning and things that I don't understand, but that you make really accessible. And I'm curious about what you are starting to track with the app, because there are so many different things that you could track. So what are you starting with, and why? What makes you think those things will be helpful?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That's a really good question. I think that there are so many things that we can track using an iPhone that all can have meaningful insights about us, about our daily lives, about our mental health. And of course, we can't do everything at once, especially to start with. So we definitely had to choose what we wanted to be able to track, what we wanted to use with our app, and to correlate that with mood. And I think how we choose what we want to track comes down to several things. The first one is scientific evidence. We want to do things because they have a meaning and because other people have worked on it and proved that it's actually helpful. And the other point is speaking to people. We all have different experiences with what has an impact on our own mental health. And I think if we don't speak to people, we'll never understand that. So that's really important for us. Be close to people, speak to them. And so with that in mind, we started to develop the app wanting to track what was more useful for a larger population of people. So we know, for example, from scientific evidence and from having spoken to people, that tracking sleep, tracking physical activity, for instance, are really important and are a real impact, generally speaking, on people's mood and across different disorders as well. So we know that for people that have bipolar disorder, for people that have diagnosed depression, for a large majority of people, these biomarkers have an impact. So we definitely want to track these. And then there are so many things that we can track alongside these. So it's really dependent on people, and will definitely improve as we go as well. And we want to stay flexible to be able to track as many things as we can, so that your own data can be really useful for you. So, for example, Joe, that was really insightful when we had to talk about the fact that the number of pictures or screenshots that you take, you realized over the years that it's generally correlated to some extent to how you were feeling. And that, I think that's something that is brilliant to understand. I mean, from my perspective, that was amazing to hear that from you, because that's really something I wouldn't have suspected if I hadn't spoken to you. So I think really speaking to people, especially generally people, know to some extent what is happening in their lives, really, and speaking to them is amazing to that respect. Yeah, definitely.
I'm just mindful, just thinking about sort of our audience here today, and just so that we make sure that you have a very good understanding of the what we're developing itself. So what we're trying to do is, a lot of the mental health information that we use to speak to our doctors today is often based on your personal experiences. So you'll have to try and remember what happened, and you'll be, well, I don't know if anybody's had the same experiences as I had, but I often have the habit of calling my doctor and I'll start crying for 5 to 10 minutes, because there's so much build up between these appointments, and you only get half an hour of appointments, and if it's a GP, it's only 15. So there's a really short amount of time, and we're struggling to balance this lack of information with the lack of clinician demand. And there is just not something quite right here, because reliable information is the most basic thing that we can try to achieve in any care. And I'm not surprised mental health is so difficult, because it is so abstract and it's almost like a black box. And we've always been okay with it being impossible to quantify. But I think that's changing. And it's really exciting to be able to think that we can use anonymized data from our smartphones that we use daily without any added effort. We can start to look at what's really impacting our mood, our mental health, and use that to derive our clinical decisions in a more confident way. And that's what's really exciting about the work that we're doing. I'll pass it back on to you, Joe.
No, I think you started to answer very much my next question, because I totally understand that. I was in a doctor's appointment literally this week, and it's how have you been the last 2 weeks? I'm like, I haven't seen you in 6 weeks, and I can't remember. I'm like looking at my diary to try and figure out where was I and how did I feel at that point, and there's often, when you're in that room, there's nobody to back you up. Like, even though you were having those moods, just to have that, like, that more objective person in the room, but yet on your side. And I think what you've been talking about is actually giving power to people to advocate for themselves, or giving them the evidence to advocate for themselves, which I think is just what's gotten me really excited about it. But as you were saying, I think I'd be really curious to find out, what are your big dreams for Humin? Because I think it's always a really good question. You're never going to get somewhere if you're not ambitious to get there. So we've just kind of mentioned clinical settings, but it'd be good to hear what else you're hoping to achieve with this app.
So I'll try and stop myself from ranting too much, but a lot of the solutions that I have come across in mental health and in general healthcare that we see in our app stores aren't good enough. Clinically, can I trust it? Do I know that it's going to ultimately get me to get better care? And that trust is important. So ultimately, I see Humin becoming a company that's able to generate clinically validated softwares that can be generated from our smartphones, very accessible, very inclusive, but can have clinical impact at the front line. So, for example, let's talk a little bit less abstract. I foresee having Humin's app available, let's say, when you first visit the GP and you don't know what's been making you feel the way that you do, and you don't know what it is. And after 3 months, you'd take that to the doctor, and the doctor would be able to be more confident in suggesting, actually, this doesn't quite look like depression. There might be something else. So I'm going to make you a confident referral to go see a psychiatrist because I know that this is quite a strong signal for something else. So being able to assist that diagnosis, being able to help you get a more confident outcome in clinical discussions is critical. And linking into this, it's about pulling that diagnostic delay forward, because I've experienced my bulimia when I was 14, 15, and I had absolutely no idea what was the right time, what I had to say, what they wanted from me, what was wrong with me. So that empowering early to get earlier care is so important, because we can change the course of mental illness if we can capture it earlier. So that's another clinical impact area. And of course, the third place is around predicting relapse. I think there's a huge opportunity there, being able to use our software to be able to say, look, based on your last 3, 4, 5 months of data, we've noticed these patterns, and we've started to be able to identify when you're likely going to relapse. So the big question is, I believe we can stop that, or reduce the likelihood, or reduce the impact, the severity of these relapses, to ultimately help that person live the way they want to. So that's the big dream. So going from general adoption, making a product that people love, a product with soul that people want to use, but ultimately building that into a credible source of software that we can use in clinic to make better decisions.
And Hugo, you're more on the tech side of that. So what are your big dreams for, what the tech side of it, really?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I completely agree with everything that Min just said. Everything really. For me, I would really work like backwards. The ultimate goal for me, I think these days, is to be able to improve people's like quality of life. Really, as you suggested, I come from a technical background. I didn't start working in like the medical field or anything. I really have like a computer science background, and I had the opportunity like 4 or 5 years ago to start applying my skills and what I really liked doing for medical purposes, and I really loved it because I could see a meaning in what I was doing. I mean, I think for everyone, like you need to find meaning in what you do, but I think really helping people is something that is so rewarding. That's amazing, and being able to use what I like doing, which is technology, to help people is just amazing. And I think that's really what I want to achieve with Humin, being able to help people. however it may happen. And so I think putting people at heart and making sure that things work for them is really important. And if we can develop something that would help them on a day-to-day basis, one person after the other, I would just be so happy with that.
Thanks, Hugo. I think you're so right about like moving it back to like today and tomorrow. It's good to be in a clinical setting, but what does it mean right now? And that's why I'd like to talk about the study that Humin is doing. So I know that because it's so personalized, right? You can't just put it on a huge mass scale, or you can, but it has to be to each individual person. And so I know that the study is one of its aims is to be able to figure out what is something that specific person will need. So as you've mentioned, like we're going to investigate photos, because I know that something has changed by the time that I'm taking a different amount of photos, but I don't know how quickly that progresses, what that information could give me. So I'm like, let's analyze that. But I know you've been doing that with men for quite some time now, and I'd really love to hear, Min, what insights.
Joe's frozen for me. Is she frozen for you as well, Hugo?
Yes, but I guess you wanted to know like what sort of insights you did get from the study that I run with you.
Let me just share a little bit more detail about this study, because it is fascinating. So what we're trying to do is, when you're trying to develop a mobile app, it takes time, and that's something that we've learned from struggling ourselves at Humin. And when you're trying to develop a startup and make it work, you always have to find ways around it, and that's something I've definitely learned throughout going through challenges at Humin. And one of the biggest limitation was that we didn't have a full stack. So we're running this study in parallel that Hugo put together, and the big merit of this was it could be rapidly done without having an existing app built. So whilst we're doing a full stack development build on our app itself, what we're doing is we're running a study. And at the end of the session, I'll definitely share some links so that you can get a bit more information about the study. We're looking at automatically collecting some of the health data that you already have on your iOS systems and getting the participants to log how they're doing throughout the day, so that we can start to train some machine learning models on understanding what has the biggest impact in changing my mood up or down. And Hugo actually ran almost like a prototype for this study before we went out to our user group. And I found that completely fascinating, because and obviously you have to be mindful that what I had before, because of my background in eating disorders, inevitably I kind of expected the physical activity aspects to correlate a lot to do with my mental health. And when I had my analysis report, Hugo said that one of the biggest things that has a huge impact on my mood is visiting basically coffee shops that are further away from my home. So not just mingling around my house, but really taking the time to visit, to walk to, across the bridge, across a different park, like visit somewhere. And when I had that report, and sorry if this is a bit like too much information, Joe, please tell me to like stop talking if I'm talking too much.
No.
I always felt so guilty about going to coffee shops. And if anybody's Korean and who's listening into this call, I always had a thing for coffee shops. I love being in coffee shops. It cures my soul. It makes me happy. But I always felt bad about spending my money on coffee shops, because I was like, you could be saving that £3. And now with inflation, it's even more. So I felt bad. But when Hugo told me that actually these are the things that help me with my mental health the most, I don't feel guilty anymore. Like I'm so happy to go and take that decision for myself to go and do these activities because I know it helps me. So it's almost like getting rid of that nuance of I'll go for a walk, because it's good for you. Like great, but it's about changing this conversation with yourself because ultimately it's us that tells us what to do, right? So in a way, it's
Yeah.
within our ability to convince ourselves what to do to help us stay happier and stay well. But this internal dialogue is really delicate, and having the intelligence to say that actually this internal dialogue, you can be a bit more generous about it. And I should go take myself to a coffee shop, and I should take that time to relax and de-stress. So I found it quite fascinating. And there are a lot of other metrics that I am sort of annoying Hugo with to see if he can do it amongst all of his other priorities. But yeah, it's been fascinating.
That's so great. Thanks, Min. And I think what's really fascinating about that is I have a similar thing about going to coffee shops, but I got that through like months of therapy. I was chatting and suddenly realized, oh, that's something that I value, that I feel guilty about doing. But whenever I do it, whenever I take time and write in my journal, whatever, it really improves my mood. And so like I came to a similar conclusion over over maybe a longer time. It's that like I learned to be compassionate to myself about that, but it's what helps you to change that dialogue is having the facts to give yourself confidence in that, right? So I had somebody else give me a conversation around, okay, I think this is a good thing for you to do, and you could see like some data that went, okay, so I think that's an incredible, and it's just like one moment out of one study so far. So it's like the very beginning of different insights for different people. But I relate to that, and that is really exciting. You and me both spending our £3 something getting coffee, but looking after our well-being. But what you were saying there around Hugo analyzing and having your data and telling you these things, like I'm not a big privacy security person, and I know this because when we first started talking, you were always saying, well, you can opt out at any time, and also like these are all the different things, and you can read through this and this, and I'm like, that's amazing. I'm so glad that I have access to all of this. But I've always been the person who kind of looks at an app and like scrolls down to the bottom and goes, okay, fine, accept all. So I'd love to hear a little bit about why you're so conscious about data, and then also from Hugo about how Humin is going to do it differently, and what you're looking to do to make sure that people are that they're giving this kind of information, but that they are protected, and that it is a safe and viable thing to do.
So many points rushing in my head. Unfortunately, I'll have to tame myself to give a concise answer. And I think if the audience is interested in learning a bit more about sort of how in practice we can make products more secure in of course the application that we're using, we're more than happy to sort of extend this conversation. But the reason why I am almost neurotic about the data elements, and I've had this feedback quite a few times saying, why are you, making sure that you're saying all of these things? It honestly goes down to just, I feel like it's the right thing to do. And I really find it difficult to explain in any other way. It's your right, and that should just be made clear. And I haven't really cracked how we can design a privacy policy and terms and conditions documents that are more readable. Every time I open one, it looks like it's kind of written in like literally the most minuscule font I've ever seen, and it's like written, if it was written upside down or in Latin, I probably wouldn't ever recognize it. So that's a mission that we still haven't cracked yet. But that's, I think, at the end of the day, I think it's my effort to get all the users that we're engaging with understand that we care about these things, and we understand, like, we acknowledge the full rights that it's your data. And I think it's almost like we want people to acknowledge that for us, because it's not easy going that extra step to anonymize all of the data before we look at all the modeling. Like, it's quite an unusual thing to do. We see it all the time, where data is an asset, so a lot of your data will be sold to make additional revenue, which, like, people might be totally fine with that. And I'm not saying that's a wrong practice and wrong thing to do, but given the sensitive settings that we're operating, right, it could, like, I don't want to feel monitored. I don't want to feel like paranoid. And the only way to do that is to give me the control. Like, I want to choose what data I want to share. I'll choose if I want a copy of my data. I'll choose if I want to stop. It's all about me, and it's all about fitting my needs, not forcing people to keep sharing data and mine it and sell it. It's just not the way we operate, full stop.
Yeah, I think, I completely agree with that. I think that the number of just health apps that are out there and that just, are at every day, like, literally there are like multiple apps that gets available on the app stores every day, and all of them can't just be of good quality. I'm not saying that they are like really amazing products, but if we think about how an app is generally designed, you have the app on your phone, you generally have some data on your app. It goes to a server, something is done with it. You don't know who's looking at your data. And of course, I'm sure, once again, that some people do it properly. But if you're not careful about how you do things and you do things not in the right way, you will end up with, just companies having tons of data, because they kind of assume that it's how they're going to make profit. And we really want to take that the opposite way. So we want to build something to improve people's lives, really. So their data is for themselves, and that's it. It's not for us. It's not for us to do something about it. We'll do something with it to help them, but it's their data. So we want to give them full flexibility on what they want to do with their own data. If they want to use it to be able, to get insights on their mental health, amazing, and that's their choice. If they don't, that's their choice as well. And that should be the case for every piece of data that we have from ourselves. Unfortunately, policies, etc., are lagging a lot behind with respect to that. So the idea would be to really give people full control of their data, and that also means for us to get access to as minimal data as we can. So as Min was saying, first starting with anonymizing everything that we can, but it also means that the ideal tool for us, the ideal app for us, would keep all of your data on your phone for yourself. So that's a concept called edge computing. I don't know if people in the audience are familiar with it, but we want to get rid of any non-necessary movement of data. Generally, we don't need to collect everything just because what if. And especially with health data that is captured on your phone, the idea would be to keep everything on your own phone. And if there is some modeling to do, if there is some analysis to be done, it would be done on your phone. And the insights are for yourself to just, provide you with the necessary tools to get better, to have a meaningful conversation with your doctor, but just for you. And that's what's really important, I guess.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks, Hugo. And I think if people are interested in some of that, to definitely send questions and we can chat some more on a different platform. I'm going to kind of wrap us up now. And I got involved with Humin because I heard them talking about giving insights around not having to put in like data and have it be done passively. And I just emailed them, was like, this sounds amazing. Like, we definitely need lived experience because you need to know what to be analyzing. And you were talking about bipolar, and I, got in contact that way. But I know that you've moved a long way since then, and there are a lot of more formal ways to follow and get involved. And so, Min, if you would just tell us a little bit about that, that'd
Sounds
be great.
good. And yeah, I can't believe how the time has gone by. Honestly, I couldn't believe it anyway. So yeah, just before we wrap up this session, we're because we're working on this passive modeling of mental health using anonymized smartphone data. Like Joe said, it's really important to sort of understand what you think and what sort of behavioral traits that matters to you, and almost like starting with that user research. And that's what Joe's been referring to. And if I may just briefly share my screen. We have a user support group, and what we do with these support group members, you will become a user advisor as somebody with lived experience in mental health. So it could be in experiencing, really struggling with low mood. It could be experiencing other symptoms of mood changes. And to be fair, like if you have any interests in these projects, we would love to hear from you and see how you would like to share your story and your experience to really influence and shape the work that we're doing. And the workshops that we do, I can say with confidence that they're quite engaging and really fun. We do workshops, we look at designs, we do surveys, and we sort of reimburse you for the time, and we look at how we can improve the way we build our analytics and design. So if you'd be interested, please go to our website, which is just humin.uk, and you'll be able to find a contact form there. So if you could just drop us an email on how on through those channels, that'd be fantastic. And I think just before we go, I know I have put the links in the chat as well, but we have started to expand our engagement in the digital space, which is really exciting. And Chloe, who is also on the call today, has been like doing fantastic work for us as well as a part of Humin team, looking at designing graphics on our Instagram and helping us with various other things. So we're very proud of our activities. So if you could support us and listen to if you would like to listen to my experience with eating disorders, and how I struggled so much with it, goodness me, that's also on the podcast. And you can watch the podcast episode on YouTube channel as well, if you'd like. But I think overall, like opening up ourselves to this session took a bit of time, because I think we wanted to, let me put that up there. Yeah, we wanted to feel prepared and come to this space with more exciting opportunities. And it means a lot to me personally, and thank you for both of you and Chloe to even be able to reach this space, to be able to engage and like speak in front of other people about our work. Like I'm so proud of us for doing that. So a huge thank you, and yeah, thank you, Jo, for moderating the conversation.
Thanks so much, guys. So that's on Spotify, and on YouTube, and then through the website if you'd like to give advice. So thank you for joining us, and follow us, and we'll keep chatting about this amazing work.
Thank you so much for everybody who's attended. If you have any questions, any notes, thoughts, please drop us a contact detail.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Take care. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.